All right, ladies and gentlemen, I say we get this show started, shall we? Dave, we good? We got everything? All right, folks. Ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, it is time for the world famous Rich Wilson Show.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the world famous Rich Wilson Show.
Hey, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another edition of the Rich Wilson Show. I'm Rich Wilson, and you're not, which in some cases that would be a good thing. Anyway, folks, wow, I got the cup backwards, I guess. I'm having my drink, Saint Javelin, the patron saint of Ukraine, which you can get one of these at therichwilsonshow.com. You can. That's where I got this one. Check it out. It's a cool mug right there. Saint Javelin, the patron saint of Ukraine. You can also get stickers and cool stuff like that. T-shirts, all kinds of stuff, to help support the podcast and keep us going. Because damn sure DoorDash isn't doing it. Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, let me get that out of this shot. That's right there. Hope you guys are having a good night. So today, because there wasn't a lot of news that happened today, but today Mathew McConaughey was at the White House for the press briefing at the White House. And so I haven't seen it. I saw little itty bitty excerpts of a couple things he said. I've heard a couple people react to it, but I haven't really watched it. So me and you are going to watch it together. And if you haven't seen it, or if you have seen it, don't spoil it for the rest of us. Okay. I heard it was supposed to be really, really good. So we're going to do that. Now I will have the controls on it. So if I need to pause something and I need to talk about something, then, we'll most definitely do that as well. Let me go to the display capture so you can see them. There you go. So Mathew McConaughey today, and let's go ahead and get started with this. Let's react to Mr. McConaughey, who, by the way, and he's going to state this in his speech, but just in case you didn't know, born and raised in Uvalde, Texas. Okay, so he's from there. And of course, from my understanding, he's going to talk about gun issues and stuff like that. And we'll react to it. So here we go. Let's see what he has to say.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Camilla. To make the loss of these lives matter.
I like what he did there.
My wife and I, Camilla, we spent most of last week on the ground with the families in Uvalde, Texas. We shared stories, tears, and memories. The common thread, independent of the anger and the confusion and the sadness, it was the same. How can these families continue to honor these deaths by keeping the dreams of these children and teachers alive? Again, how can the loss of these lives matter? So while we honor and acknowledge the victims, we need to recognize that this time, it seems that something is different. There's a sense that perhaps there's a viable path forward. Responsible parties in this debate seem to at least be committed to sitting down and having a real conversation about a new and improved path forward. A path that can bring us closer together and make us safer as a country. A path that can actually get something done this time. Camilla and I came here to share my stories from my hometown of Uvalde. Came here to take meetings with elected officials on both sides of the aisle. We came here to speak to them, to speak with them, and to urge them to speak with each other. To remind and inspire them that the American people will continue to drive forward the mission of keeping our children safe, because it's more than our right to do so. It's our responsibility to do so. I'm here today in the hopes of applying what energy, reason, and passion that I have into trying to turn this moment into a reality. Because as I said, this moment is different. We are in a window of opportunity right now that we have not been in before. A window where it seems like real change can happen.
Okay, so far, he's opened up pretty eloquently about how everybody needs to come together. And that is a very true statement, because we're still seeing both sides in this really refusing to work together. So far, it's pretty good. This has been pretty good.
Uvalde, Texas is where I was born. It's where my mom taught kindergarten less than a mile from Robb Elementary. Uvalde is where I learned to master a Daisy BB gun. That took 2 years before I graduated to a .410 shotgun. Uvalde is where I was taught to revere the power and the capability of the tool that we call a gun.
I want to point that out right there. Thank God somebody finally said it that has some clout, that has some notoriety. He stated a tool. I've been saying that forever, that guns are simply a tool that are used to commit these acts. Thank God he said it.
Uvalde is where I learned responsible gun ownership. Now, Uvalde called me on May 24th when I learned the news of this devastating tragedy. I had been out of cellular range, working in the studio all day when I emerged, and messages about a mass shooting in the town I was born in began flooding my inbox. In a bit of shock, I drove home. I hugged my children a bit tighter and longer than the night before. And then the reality of what had happened that day in the town I was born in set in. So the next morning, Camilla, myself, the kids, we loaded up the truck and we drove to Uvalde. And when we arrived a few hours later, I got to tell you, even from the inside of our vehicle, you could feel the shock in the town. You could feel the pain, the denial, the disillusion, anger, blame, sadness, loss of lives, and dreams halted. We saw ministries, we saw first responders, counselors, cooks, families trying to grieve without it being on the front page news. We met with the local funeral director and countless morticians who hadn't slept since the massacre the day before, because they've been working 24/7 trying to handle so many bodies at once, so many little innocent bodies who had their entire lives still yet to live. And that is there that we met two of the grieving parents, Ryan and Jessica Ramirez. Their 10-year-old daughter, Alethea. She was one of the 19 children that were killed the day before. Now, Alethea, her dream was to go to art school in Paris and one day share her art with the world. Ryan and Jessica were eager to share Alethea's art with us and said if we could share it, that somehow, maybe that would make Alethea smile in heaven. They told us that showing someone else Alethea's art would in some way keep her alive. Now, this particular drawing is a self-portrait, all right, of Alethea drawing with her friend in heaven looking down on her, drawing the very same picture. Her mother said of this drawing, she said, you know, we never really talked to her about heaven before, but somehow she knew. Alethea was 10 years old. Her father, Ryan, this man was steady. He was uncommonly together and calm. When a frazzled friend of his came up and said, how are you so calm? I'd be going crazy. Ryan told him, he said, no, you wouldn't. No, you wouldn't. You'd be strong for your wife and kids, because if they see you go crazy, that will not help them. Just a week prior, Ryan got a full-time line job stringing power lines from pole to pole. And every day since landing that well-paying full-time job, he reminded his daughter Alethea, he said, "Girl, Daddy gonna spoil you now." Told her every single night. He said, "Daddy's gonna take you to SeaWorld one day." But he didn't get to spoil his daughter. Alethea, she did not get to go to SeaWorld.
Let me explain one of the things that he's doing here. Okay. And I understand why he's doing it, and bravo. He's obviously emotional. That part is real. A lot of people would say, oh, he's an actor. The man is from that town. He was born and raised in that town. Okay? He still regularly goes back to that town, does a lot of things for that town. But what he is doing is he's taking the argument and the fight that's been going on away, because the narrative went from the children to political points about gun control. And the kids were kind of, in the beginning, the kids were the forefront, and then they became the background. And they just kind of got blurred in the distance. And Mathew McConaughey right now is putting the faces and the lives of the children in the forefront, back again in a room full of reporters, to remind them that this tragedy is not about a gun. It's about the loss of life. And he's redirecting this. And he is doing a damn fine job of it.
We also met Anna and Danilo, the mom and the stepdad of 9-year-old Maite Rodriguez. Now, Maite wanted to be a marine biologist. She was already in contact with Corpus Christi University of A&M for her future college enrollment. 9 years old. Maite cared for the environment so strongly that when the city asked her mother if they could release some balloons into the sky in her memory, her mom said, "Oh, no, Maite wouldn't want to litter." Maite wore green high-top Converse with a heart she had hand-drawn on the right toe because they represented her love of nature. Camilla's got these shoes. Can you show these shoes, please? Wore these every day. Green Converse with a heart on the right toe. These are the same green Converse on her feet that turned out to be the only clear evidence that could identify her after the shooting. How about that? Maite wrote a letter. Her mom said if Maite's letter could help someone accomplish her dream, that then her death would have an impact. And it would mean her dying had a point and wasn't pointless. That it would make the loss of her life matter. The letter reads, "Marine biologist, I want to pass school to get to my dream college. My dream college is in Corpus Christi by the ocean. I need to live next to the ocean because I want to be a marine biologist." Marine biologists study animals and the water. Most of the time I will be in a lab. Sometimes I will be on TV. Then there was Ellie Garcia, a 10-year-old, and her parents, Stephen and Jennifer. Ellie loved to dance and she loved church. She even knew how to drive tractors and was already working with her dad and her uncle mowing yards. Ellie was always giving of her gifts, her time, even half-eaten food on her plate. They said around the house, we called her the Great Regifter. Smiling through tears, her family told us how Ellie loved to embrace, said she was the biggest hugger in the family. Now, Ellie was born Catholic, but had been going to Baptist church with her uncle for the last couple of years. Her mom and dad were proud of her because they said She was learning to love God no matter where. The week prior to her passing, she'd been preparing to read a verse from the Bible for the next Wednesday night's church service. The verse was from Deuteronomy 6:5. And thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, with all thy soul, and with all thy might. That's who Ellie was becoming. But she never got to read it. Service on a Wednesday night.
One thing that I do want to point out to you is, if you could not tell already, the man is clearly upset, and he's upset with the individuals in the room. If you don't see it, the way that he is pointing out things, he's pointing it out to the people in the room and a little bit to the people outside of that room, and especially on social media, that the arguments that everybody's having, you've lost sight of who these kids were, what they were going to become. That's what's upsetting him right now as he talks about this. And he's making sure the press corps that's sitting there right now knows all full well who these kids are, who they were going to be, what their dreams were. Because again, like I said before, in the beginning, the first several hours, it was about the children, and then it turned into everything else, and the children faded off into nothing in the background. He is doing a very masterful job, and it's true. It's true feelings that he has, but the way that he is directing those feelings is amazing to get this point across. And like I said, he truly feels this way. This isn't an act by an actor. Mr. McConaughey truly feels this way.
Then there was a fairy tale love story of a teacher named Irma and her husband Joe. What a great family this was. This was an amazing family. Camilla and I, we sat with about 20 of their family members in their living room, along with their 4 kids. Kids were 23, 19, 15, and 13. They shared all these stories about how Irma and Joe served the community and would host all these parties, and how Irma and Joe were planning on getting a food truck together when they soon retired. They were humble, hard-working people. Irma was a teacher who her family said went above and beyond and just couldn't say no to any kind of teaching. Joe had been commuting to and from work 70 miles away in Del Rio for years. Together they were the glue of the family. Both worked overtime to support their 4 kids. Irma even worked every summer when school was out. The money she had made 2 summers ago paid to paint the front of the house. The money she made last summer paid to paint the sides of the house. This summer's work was going to pay to paint the back of the house. Because Irma was one of the teachers who was gunned down in the classroom. Joe, her husband, literally died of heartache the very next day when he had a heart attack. They never got to paint the back of their house. They never got to retire. And they never got to get that food truck together. We also met a cosmetologist. She was well-versed in mortuary makeup. That's the task of making the victims appear as peaceful and natural as possible for their open casket viewings. These bodies were very different. They needed much more than makeup to be presentable. They needed extensive restoration. Why? due to the exceptionally large exit wounds of an AR-15 rifle. Most of the body so mutilated that only DNA test or green Converse could identify him. Many children were left not only dead but hollow. So yes, counselors are going to be needed in Uvalde for a long time. Counselors are needed in all these places where these mass shooters have been for a long time. I was told by many that it takes a good year before people even understand what to do next. And even then, when they become secure enough to take the first step forward, a lifetime is not going to heal those wounds.
Oh, they'll never heal.
But again, you know what every one of these parents wanted, what they asked us for? What every parent separately expressed in their own way to Camilla and me? That they want their children's dreams to live on. That they want their children's dreams to continue to accomplish something after they are gone. They want to make their loss of life matter. Look, we heard from so many people, right? Families of the deceased, mothers, fathers, sisters, brothers, Texas Rangers, hunters, Border Patrol, and responsible gun owners who won't give up their Second Amendment right to bear arms. And you know what they all said? We want secure and safe schools, and we want gun laws that won't make it so easy for the bad guys to get these damn guns. So, we know it's on the table. We need to invest in mental health care. We need safer schools. We need to restrain sensationalized media coverage.
Hold
we
on.
need to restore our family values.
2 points right there that just probably made everybody but one person in that press pool just made their head explode inside. We need, and those two things right there are so monumental. We need to stop sensational journalism. He's not wrong. This garbage that I've been talking about for weeks on end now about how all these lies and all these stretched out and everything else, and restore a restoration of family values, which is one of the things that we can point to in the increase of these violent acts that are happening in society. We can look at the degrading of family values and the drop off where people are being pushed to get rid of what we all thought were family values that we had learned over hundreds of years in family units. It's things that I have spoken about. I've got comment over here, fear news, scare people into division. That's not what the point was that he was making on that. 1% of children are shot at school. More children are shot outside of school. And you're correct. You are correct on that, Nikolai. Okay, but the point that he is making here was not, I want to scare you into, banning things and dividing people. That wasn't the point. The man has a lot of anger towards the press and the way that they've been portraying it. And that's one of the reasons why he gave that cocked eyebrow look when he said sensational journalism. So, two very strong points just got thrown. And I haven't seen any of the news lately, but I'm wondering if they're going to start lambasting him for throwing those things out there. Station manager. Yes, we are. We are both. All right. Let's continue on.
We need to restore our American values and We need responsible gun ownership. Responsible gun ownership. We need background checks.
American values.
We need to raise the minimum age to purchase an AR-15 rifle to 21. We need a waiting period for those rifles. We need red flag laws and consequences for those who abuse them. These are reasonable, practical, tactical regulations.
All right, I'm going to rewind that back just a hair.
We need to restrain sensationalized media coverage. We need to restore our family values. We need to restore our American values. And we need responsible gun ownership.
Okay, so now not only have we gone after sensationalized media coverage, we're now stating that we need to reinstitute family values. We need to institute American values and responsible gun ownership. Okay, and he addressed that in the beginning of this, talking about people that were responsible. He said that he talked to people who support their Second Amendment rights. And then, let's see, the next one where he talks about the one big one that I talked about yesterday.
Responsible gun ownership. We need background checks.
Mm-hmm. We got that.
We need to raise the minimum age to purchase an AR-15 rifle to 21. We need a waiting period for those rifles. We need red flag laws and consequences for those who abuse them.
I've been talking about that since the Buffalo situation, where we have red flag law. I want not only people who abuse red flag laws to be able to get and you abuse that system in order to get a hold of a gun. I want penalties for the people who don't enforce red flag laws. And let me explain to you why. The Buffalo shooter, as an 18-year-old, was reviewed psychologically when he made a statement about wanting to kill a bunch of people. Now, he lied, but at that point, that should have put him on a specific waiting list to be able to purchase a firearm until he could be evaluated according to the red flag laws of New York, till he could be evaluated, and a judge literally has to sign off that he's okay to purchase a firearm. But the cops, when they took him to the facility, never filed that report with the New York Attorney General's office, which would have triggered the red flag law, which then meant he would have had to be evaluated and passed by a judge to be able to purchase a firearm. And all he had to do was take a psychiatrist into a court or into the office for the psychiatrist to say, yes, he is perfectly fine. They didn't do that. And because of that, I think that law enforcement office should be penalized for not doing that job. Also, I don't know if... thank you. Exactly. And here's the thing. Dean says, if you guys aren't reading it, good for C-SPAN. C-SPAN doesn't edit anything. If you turn on C-SPAN during the day, it will literally just play as it goes. And sometimes it'll put you to sleep. But one of the things that I would like to see on these background checks, and I'm perfectly fine with this, youth records cannot be sealed away from background checks. Okay? Youth records, let me say that again for the people in the back. Youth records cannot be sealed away from background checks for firearms. Because a lot of these situations would have prevented purchasing of firearms by these if their youth background was available and triggered in a background check. Okay, if the Uvalde shooter's youth background was not sealed and would have hit through the background check, it would have triggered. background check loophole allowed him to be able to go with the gun before the background check was cleared. That needs to go away. You do not walk out of any establishment or anywhere that sells a firearm until you have a cleared background check. I don't even understand why that's still a thing. I am a 2A supporter. I am a responsible gun owner. I do not understand why it is that those loopholes still exist. There's no reason for it. Let's continue on with, I've got Robert over here, sensational media coverage, MMC for president. No, I'm not going to say that McConaughey should be president, because he has some pretty far out there leanings on some things that I'm not sure how that would work. What I would like to see is him become a mayor and then maybe work up to governor of the state of Texas first, before we put him in the White House, to see how those kind of, he's got some stuff that even both sides would consider extreme, in thought. So, I mean, don't get me wrong. It would be really cool to have a president of the United States sit there and just suddenly go, all right. But he's got some things that not sure it would be so great. Let's continue on.
These are reasonable, practical, tactical regulations to our nation, states, communities, schools, and homes. Responsible gun owners are fed up with the Second Amendment being abused and hijacked by some deranged individuals.
That is probably one of the greatest ways to put that ever. I had never thought of a way to put that until how he just formulated that sentence right there. Bravo. That is a great statement.
These regulations are not a step back. They're a step forward for a civil society and the Second Amendment. Look, is this cure-all? Hell no. But people are hurting. Families are, parents are. And look, as divided as our country is, this gun responsibility issue is one that we agree on more than we don't. It really is. Look, this should be a nonpartisan issue. This should not be a partisan issue. There is not a Democratic or Republican value in one single act of these shooters. It's not. But people in power have failed to act. So we're asking you. And I'm asking you, will you please ask yourselves, can both sides rise above? Can both sides see beyond the political problem at hand and admit that we have a life preservation problem on our hands? Because we got a chance right now to reach for and to grasp a higher ground above our political affiliations. A chance to make a choice that does more than protect your party. A chance to make a choice that protects our country now and for the next generation. We got to take a sober, humble, and honest look in the mirror and rebrand ourselves based on what we truly value. What we truly value. We got to get some real courage and honor our immortal obligations instead of our party affiliations. Enough with the counterpunching. Enough of the invalidation of the other side. Let's come to the common table that represents the American people. Find a middle ground, the place where most of us Americans live anyway, especially on this issue. Because I promise you, America, you and me, we are not as divided as we were being told we are.
Thank you.
No. How about we get inspired? Give ourselves just cause to revere our future again. Maybe set an example for our children. Give us reason to tell them, hey, listen and watch these men and women. These are great American leaders right here. Hope you grow up to be like them. And let's admit it. We can't truly be leaders if we're only living for re-election.
Mm-hmm.
Let's be knowledgeable and wise and act on what